During a family trip across the Caribbean, my daughter-in-law humiliated me in front of strangers. She slammed the cabin door in my face. "Let the old woman sleep in the hallway," she said. "Better yet, throw her overboard." Laughter burst from inside. Passengers walking by stopped to stare. My cheeks burned. I just straightened my back, walked to the front desk, and handed over a platinum card. When the concierge recognized my name, everyone went pale. Before we begin, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I want to see how far this story can travel. My name is Eleanor Whitman. I am 62 years old, and I had never imagined that the most humiliating moment of my life would arrive not in the quiet of my home, but in front of strangers, in the glowing hallways of a luxury vessel where laughter echoed louder than compassion. The trip had been presented to me as a chance for family bonding. My son Daniel had told me weeks before that he and his wife Sabrina were planning a spring break voyage from Miami across the Caribbean. They would take the children, Lucas and Chloe, and he thought it might be nice if I joined. It wasn't his words that convinced me though. It was the small silence afterward, the hesitation in his voice, as if he knew his wife would not approve. But still, he gave me that opening. I told myself that perhaps time together, away from work and the everyday burdens, would soften her sharp edges. Sabrina was 35, beautiful, ambitious, and as cold as polished glass. A marketing consultant for major brands, she lived in a world of polished hotel lobbies, sleek laptops, and rehearsed smiles. To her, I was simply an intrusion into a life she wanted tightly controlled. She saw my presence as an inconvenience, a reminder of family obligations she had never truly embraced. I had felt it before, in her tone, in her cutting remarks disguised as politeness, but I thought a week at sea might change something. Foolish, isn't it? How hope lingers even when experience tells us otherwise. We boarded in Miami, the sun blazing down on the crowded port, the children bouncing with excitement, and I still clinging to the fragile belief that this trip could heal the distance that had been growing for years. Daniel carried bags, Sabrina barked instructions, and I trailed behind. My steps slow but steady, smiling at the children when they ran to show me their cruise cards with their names printed neatly. They were innocent in all of this, and for their sake I tried to ignore the sharp glance Sabrina threw over her shoulder when I paused to catch my breath. From the first steps onto the ship, I felt the contrast between luxury and reality. The hallways were lined with golden lights and plush carpets. Yet beneath that glow I sensed the shadow of something brewing. Sabrina's voice already carried that tone I knew so well, mocking without words, dismissive without needing to say much at all. I told myself I could endure it. After all, I had spent decades working night shifts as a nurse, caring for patients who called me names in pain, holding hands of the dying, facing exhaustion so deep it blurred my vision. What was a week on a ship with a difficult daughter-in-law compared to that? But deep inside, something warned me. The sea stretched wide and endless outside those tall windows, and the ship's engines hummed like a heartbeat under my feet. I wanted to believe in peace, in reconciliation, in laughter shared at dinner tables. Instead, what awaited me was a cruelty so sharp it cut through every layer of dignity I had tried to protect. And the worst part? It wasn't hidden behind closed doors. It was displayed for everyone to see, and the echoes of their laughter still follow me to this day. The first day aboard seemed calm enough, though the tension followed me like a shadow. Daniel tried to make small talk, telling me about the ship's engineering, pointing out its endless decks, the pools, the theaters. I listened with half a smile, because even as his words floated in the air, Sabrina's silence pressed against me like a blade. She walked beside him with that posture of possession, as if the ship itself was hers, and I was an intruder, daring to breathe the same air. At dinner that night, in the glittering hall where chandeliers sparkled above white-clothed tables, Sabrina made her first move. She leaned toward Daniel, whispering, not as quietly as she thought. I heard it, every word. She said, "Your mother is embarrassing, asking the waiter for plain soup, like it's a hospital cafeteria." Daniel shifted uncomfortably, murmured back something I couldn't catch, but I felt the heat rise in my chest. I lowered my spoon, hands trembling, but I refused to let her see me break. The children laughed freely, innocent of the tension hanging heavy between the adults. Lucas told me about the soccer field on the top deck. Chloe described the ice cream machine near the arcade. I nodded, listening, clinging to their joy like a lifeline. Then, Sabrina smiled at them sweetly and said, "Make sure Grandma doesn't slow you down tomorrow when we go ashore. She's not as fast as she used to be." They giggled, thinking it was harmless. But I felt the sting deep inside, sharper than any cut. The second day was worse. While Daniel signed the family up for excursions, Sabrina commented loud enough for others in line to hear. She said Eleanor should probably stay on board. The sun might be too much for her. A couple standing nearby glanced at me, then quickly looked away, embarrassed on my behalf. I wanted to speak, to reclaim space, but decades of swallowing my pride kept me silent. I reminded myself that silence could be power if used at the right moment. That night, alone in my cabin, I looked out at the black ocean stretching endless beyond the balcony. I thought about the years I had spent caring for others, holding broken bodies together in hospital wards, raising Daniel after his father's death, sacrificing everything to keep our lives steady. And now here I was, treated like excess baggage, laughed at by a woman who had never known hunger, never known loss. My heart tightened, but with it came a spark of something else: resolve. You might wonder why I didn't confront her right then, why I let those words pass. But the truth is, I was waiting. There are moments in life where patience is not weakness, but strategy. I knew Sabrina would go further, people like her always do, and when she crossed the line, when she went too far, I would be ready. Stay with me until the very end, because what happened next changed everything. On the third evening, the ship docked in Puerto Rico, and the day was filled with beaches, markets, and the noisy laughter of other families. By the time we returned on board, the children were exhausted, clutching souvenirs, their faces sunburned with joy. I carried Chloe's small bag because her arms had given out. Sabrina noticed and smirked, whispering to Daniel, "See, she's slowing us down already." I bit my tongue. The taste of salt lingered, but not from the sea. When we reached our deck, the air conditioning hummed softly, and the long corridor stretched like a tunnel. I stepped forward, ready to slip into the room and rest, but the cabin door closed in my face. I froze, the sound sharp and deliberate. From the other side, Sabrina's voice rang clear, dripping with venom. "Let her stay out there. The hallway is good enough for her." Then came laughter, cruel and echoing through the thin walls. I knocked once, firmly believing Daniel would undo the damage. But the only sound was Sabrina's laugh growing louder, followed by her children's giggles. Lucas shouted, "Grandma has no bed." Sabrina added, "Maybe she can sleep in the hallway with the luggage." Strangers walking past slowed, curiosity lighting their eyes. Some chuckled, thinking it was all in jest, but I felt their stares burn into me. My cheeks flushed with humiliation, my body rigid with shame. The corridor became a stage, and I was its unwilling star. A young couple shook their heads as they passed, one of them muttering, "That's awful." Another man laughed softly, as if watching a cheap performance. Every step, every whisper carved deeper into me. My hands trembled, but I refused to cry. I straightened my back, the years of discipline guiding me, and I walked away from the locked door with each step heavier than the last. At the end of the corridor, I saw the glowing sign of the concierge desk. The young attendant looked up, startled by my rigid expression. I placed a small leather wallet on the counter and slid out a platinum membership card. Relic of the life I had built with my late husband. The attendant's eyes widened. He excused himself, then returned with the cruise manager, a tall man with silver at his temples and authority in his presence. The manager spoke my name with reverence. "Mrs. Whitman, it is an honor to have you aboard. Please, follow me." His voice carried down the hall, reaching the ears of those who had just mocked me. I saw them freeze, their smiles fading, their eyes shifting away. In that instant, humiliation transformed into fire. They had laughed at me locked outside a door, but soon they would witness what it meant to rise above mockery, and I vowed silently that Sabrina would regret ever underestimating me. The concierge led me down a private hallway, the kind most passengers never saw. The carpet was thicker, the lights dimmed with elegance rather than glare. I heard whispers following us, footsteps slowing as curious eyes trailed my path. When we stopped before the polished doors of the presidential suite, the manager smiled warmly and said, "This will be your cabin from now on." My fingers grazed the handle, and for the first time in days I felt power shift back into my hands. Inside, the suite stretched twice the size of Daniel and Sabrina's cabin. The dining table gleamed beneath a crystal chandelier. The balcony opened wide to the endless sea, and the bed looked like something out of a royal chamber. The manager poured me champagne and added, "If there's anything you require, Mrs. Whitman, you need only call." His words were more than service, they were recognition. They reminded me that status could not be erased by mockery. Later that evening, I crossed paths with Daniel in the hallway. His face tightened with guilt when he saw me step out of the grand suite. He whispered, "Mother, I didn't know she would. I didn't want that." I stared at him, my voice steady. "You let it happen. Silence is the weapon of cowards." He lowered his gaze, unable to meet my eyes. For the first time, he looked like a boy again, uncertain, stripped of the man he tried to be beside his wife. Sabrina, however, had no shame in her posture. She approached later, lips curled in a false smile. "Enjoying the upgrade?" she asked, her voice sharp beneath the sweetness. I looked at her, letting silence stretch, then answered slowly. "Some doors opened because of respect, others closed because of cruelty. The difference is clear to everyone now." Her eyes flickered with something she couldn't hide, fear disguised as disdain. She turned quickly, dragging Chloe by the hand, her heels striking the carpet like gunshots. Around the ship, whispers began to circulate. I overheard a man near the pool bar say, "That poor woman, did you see how she carried herself after they laughed at her? She's stronger than most of us." A woman replied, "And did you see the manager escort her? That's dignity." Their words spread like waves, soft but powerful. Sabrina's laughter could echo through a cabin, but the murmurs of truth carried further across the ship's corridors and lounges. That night, as I stood alone on the balcony of my new suite, the ocean wind brushing against my face, I made a vow. No longer would I shrink beneath her ridicule. No longer would I let silence defend her cruelty. She had locked me out once, thinking I had no place, no power. But the sea teaches patience, and storms gather slowly before they break. Sabrina had started a game she thought I couldn't play. Now she would learn what it meant to lose. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the ship's decks as passengers gathered for breakfast. I arrived later than usual, not hurried, dressed in a soft blue dress that carried no extravagance but demanded respect through its simplicity. When I entered, several faces turned toward me, recognition in their eyes. Some smiled faintly, others nodded as if to say they remembered the cruelty I had endured. I held my head high, my silence sharper than any blade. Sabrina noticed, and her smirk faltered. At the buffet, I reached for fruit when a crew member hurried forward and said, "Allow me, Mrs. Whitman." His gesture was unnecessary but deliberate, and Sabrina's eyes narrowed as she watched me being attended to. She whispered loudly to Daniel, "Must be nice to get special treatment for pity." I turned slightly, met her gaze, and replied, "Respect is never pity. It's something you can't demand, only earn." Her face flushed with anger, though she quickly turned to cover it with a sip of coffee. Throughout the day, I moved quietly, but with intent. When Lucas asked me to join him at the sports deck, I agreed, and soon we were laughing together as he tried to teach me the rules of a game I barely understood. Chloe clung to my arm, asking questions about my years in the hospital. Their voices carried, their joy wrapping around me, and I saw Sabrina watching from a distance. Her attempt to separate me from them was unraveling thread by thread, and she knew it. Later in the theater, Daniel sat beside me, restless. He muttered, "You're gaining attention, Mother? People are talking." I kept my eyes on the stage as I answered, "Let them. You worry about whispers, but I worry about truth. And the truth is, your silence made her cruelty louder." His hands tightened on his knees, shame plain across his face. I felt no pity. It was long overdue that he understood the cost of his weakness. By evening, I decided to act with precision. Sabrina strutted into the lounge, wearing a red dress meant to capture attention. Instead, eyes followed me as the manager himself approached to ask if I was comfortable. If I required anything further, Sabrina froze, watching the scene unfold. I thanked him politely, then glanced at her. The message was unspoken but clear. I had influence here, and her power was nothing more than noise in comparison. When I returned to my suite, the ocean outside was calm, but within me, a storm was forming. Every glance, every word, every gesture had become part of my quiet retaliation. I was no longer enduring her cruelty. I was shaping her downfall, and though the night was peaceful, I knew her rage would grow. That was what I wanted, because people who lose control reveal themselves faster. And when Sabrina exposed the ugliest parts of her nature, I would be ready to finish what she had started. The next morning brought a deceptive calm, like the smooth surface before a storm. Sabrina arrived at the lounge with a cluster of friends, laughing loudly to mark territory, dressed as someone who believes appearance is argument. She passed me with a studied nod, her eyes appraising the room. I noticed every sign of arrogance, the designer bag, the perfume that announced her before her voice. I walked by without a ripple, measured in step, knowing social rituals were weapons, as sharp as any tongue. By afternoon they announced a themed dinner in the Grand Salon, and families prepared with care. Sabrina made a show of pulling me close, and said, loud enough for half the table to hear, "Make sure Grandma doesn't spill anything on the linen. We paid extra for this table." Heads turned. I breathed slow, and replied, "I know how to use a fork, Sabrina. Maybe practice humility sometime." My words landed cool and precise, and for a moment the confidence drained from her face. That evening, when the orchestra played a soft piece, she tried to isolate me again and offered, "You'll be more comfortable near the exit, less trouble for everyone." There was cruelty disguised as concern. I smiled and answered, "No, thank you. I'll stay where people are kind enough to share the music." Nearby tables murmured approval, and a woman leaned toward me whispering, "Good for you. If this night sharpened your curiosity, please subscribe and stay. The truth's final act is worth waiting for." Daniel's reaction began shifting, small and fracturing like a hairline crack across plaster. He found me in a corridor and started, "Eleanor, I didn't mean," I cut him off with quiet force. "You meant more than you know. Silence is your consent." He had no retort, left only the bare discomfort of being seen. The son I had raised appeared that moment as a young, uncertain man, stripped of posturing. Watching his discomfort hurt, yet it was necessary. The rot had to be exposed. Sabrina, sensing the ground slipping from under her stilettos, escalated into a series of petty public assaults. Exaggerated notices to servers, when I received extra care. Theatrical tugging of Lucas's sleeve to draw him away, murmured orders aimed at marginalizing me. Each attempt to diminish produced the reverse outcome. Observers began to perceive her cruelty rather than my supposed frailty. A couple nearby exchanged looks, and a simple audible comment, "She's cruel," spread like a corrective rumor that undermined Sabrina's performance. That night, I sat on the suite balcony, ocean lights like scattered embers below, feeling the cumulative weight of years I had tolerated. My revenge was not loud. It was composed of precise gestures, reclaimed dignity, and subtle exposures that revealed who I truly was and who she always refused to see. A larger storm was building, one that would strip pretense in daylight. I smiled with resolve as the waves kept time beneath me. Soon Sabrina would learn that public humiliation sows the seeds of personal ruin. The cruise reached its midpoint, and with it came a formal gala where passengers dressed in gowns and tuxedos. I wore a modest black dress with pearls Daniel had once given me, and I entered quietly, unhurried, but eyes followed. Sabrina appeared moments later, glittering in sequins, desperate to capture every glance. She swept into the room holding Daniel's arm, as if she owned not only him, but the evening itself. Yet whispers lingered about her cruelty, and she felt it. When the dinner began, Sabrina decided to strike. She raised her glass, commanding attention, and said with a sharp smile, "Some people here have been enjoying privileges they don't deserve. It must be nice to take sympathy and turn it into status." The room stiffened. My hand rested calmly on the tablecloth. I lifted my gaze and answered, "True status is never given by sympathy, but earned by character. Everyone here knows the difference." The silence that followed was her defeat disguised as applause. Her eyes blazed, and she leaned toward me, lowering her voice, but ensuring others could still hear. "You think anyone respects you, Eleanor? You're a burden. Daniel only tolerates you." My son flinched, his fork clattering to the plate. I looked at her without blinking, and replied, "If you must shout your worth, it's because no one else can see it." Gasps broke around us, and Sabrina's face twisted as if the mask she wore had cracked before an audience. Daniel stood, voice trembling. "Sabrina, enough." His words were late but undeniable, hanging heavy over the table. For the first time, he did not shield her. She attempted to laugh it off, tossing her hair, but the tension in the room had already shifted. Guests turned their attention back to their meals, murmuring softly. The show concluded. Her glittering dress no longer drew admiration, it was nothing but armor failing against truth sharpened by silence and precision. Later on the deck under moonlight, Sabrina cornered me away from the others. Her voice dripped venom. "You're ruining everything. Do you think they'll forget who you really are?" I looked out over the dark waves before answering. "I am exactly who I've always been. What you call ruin, others call revelation. And you, Sabrina, revealed yourself long before I ever spoke." The ocean swallowed her fury, leaving only the sound of waves breaking against steel. That night, alone in my suite, I replayed every moment. Her laughter in the hallway, her attempts at isolation, her desperate need to parade superiority, and now her exposure. I realized that vengeance didn't always arrive with fire and thunder. Sometimes it came with stillness, with patience, with truth too heavy for lies to stand against. As I closed the balcony doors, I smiled faintly. Sabrina had wanted to break me in public. Instead, she had shattered herself. The morning after the gala, whispers traveled faster than the ocean breeze. Passengers greeted me with warm smiles, small nods, quiet respect that spoke volumes. Sabrina passed among them glittering still, but every greeting was colder, clipped. She noticed, and anger simmered beneath her painted smile. Lucas clung to me at breakfast, asking if I would join him by the pool later. Sabrina pulled him away sharply, snapping, "Don't bother her, she has enough to prove." His face fell, and I felt the wound, her cruelty left in her own children. Later, Daniel sought me out in the library, a rare quiet place on the ship. He stood awkwardly by the shelves, his voice low. "Mother, I've failed you. I let her belittle you, and I stood aside." I closed the book in my lap and looked up. "You failed yourself too, Daniel. Respect isn't only about protecting others, it's about protecting what is right." His eyes watered, and for once, shame became the teacher his pride had never allowed. Sabrina, sensing her grip on him slipping, orchestrated a final spectacle. At lunch, she announced loudly, "Perhaps it's time to discuss who really belongs here. Some people drag families down, living on scraps of old reputation." All eyes turned again. Waiting, I did not hesitate. The only person dragging this family down is the one desperate to humiliate others to feel taller. Status isn't a mirror, Sabrina. You don't grow by shrinking someone else. The applause that followed silenced even the orchestra. Her fury ignited, and she hissed at Daniel in front of everyone. "Are you going to defend her or stand there like a coward?" His face turned pale, the room holding its breath. He whispered, trembling, "I'm done protecting lies." The words fell like stone into water, rippling through the crowd. Sabrina's hand slammed the table, but Daniel did not flinch. For the first time, his silence ended, and it ended against her. The children, wide-eyed, turned to me. Chloe whispered, "Grandma, can I stay with you tonight?" Her innocence exposed more than any speech ever could. Sabrina snapped, "No, you're with me," but the crowd had already heard the plea. It wasn't rebellion, it was longing. And in that moment, Sabrina's authority collapsed beneath the weight of her own bitterness. Her children's hearts were shifting, and there was nothing she could do to drag them back. That night, I stood once again on the balcony. The horizon endless, the wind cold against my face. I thought of all the years I had bent myself small, made myself quiet, endured cruelty in silence, and here, above a black ocean, it ended. My dignity had not only been restored but reborn. Sabrina had tried to bury me in humiliation, but her hands were dirty now. Her name carried whispers of scorn. She was the author of her downfall, and I would never again bow to her shadow. The final day of the cruise arrived with a restless air, as if the sea itself anticipated an ending. Passengers packed their belongings, yet whispers still lingered. Wherever Sabrina walked, silence followed. Wherever I walked, acknowledgement, surface small nods, discreet smiles, the quiet respect that cannot be purchased. It was not victory I sought, but justice, and justice had unfolded before an audience that could never unsee what had been revealed. That morning at breakfast, Sabrina made one last attempt to assert control. She leaned across the table, her voice cold. "Enjoy this little moment, Eleanor. When we return, no one will care." I looked at her, steady and unflinching. You're wrong. Moments define us, and this moment will follow you longer than you imagine. Daniel lowered his fork, his gaze shifting away from her, for the first time without guilt, only resolve. Later, as luggage filled the corridors, Chloe tugged at my hand. Grandma, can I visit you when we get back? Her voice was soft, her eyes pleading. Before I could answer, Sabrina barked. Enough, Chloe. I placed my hand gently over the child's and said, Yes, my door is always open. Gasps rippled from nearby tables. In that simple exchange, Sabrina's control cracked completely. The children's loyalty had chosen warmth over ice, truth over performance. On deck, as the shoreline of Miami came into view, Sabrina cornered me for the last time. Her words spat like venom. You think you've won. You've poisoned them against me. I answered calmly, my eyes fixed on the horizon. I didn't poison anything. I only stopped swallowing yours. Respect isn't mine. To give or take from you, it's yours to destroy. And you did it yourself. Her silence was the loudest sound I had ever heard from her. When we disembarked, the manager personally escorted me down the gangway, his voice carrying, It has been an honor. Mrs. Whitman, we hope to see you again. Cameras flashed from tourists, passengers watched, and in that instant the story closed as it had begun in public. But with the roles reversed, I was no longer the old woman, mocked in a hallway. I was the woman whose dignity had been measured, tested, and reclaimed in full view of witnesses. As I stepped onto solid ground, I felt a calm resolve settle over me. Vengeance had not been loud or violent, but deliberate, patient, and undeniable. Sabrina wanted me buried in humiliation. Instead, she buried herself. Daniel walked behind me, silent but no longer blind. Chloe's hand remained in mine. And I knew then. The greatest revenge is not cruelty repaid, but dignity restored, shining so bright that those who tried to dim it are left choking in their own shadows.